Hello, everyone. Have you ever heard of a house that looks completely normal from the outside? A house that seems just like any other family home. Yet the moment you step inside, you can feel something is very wrong. Behind the walls of this quiet-looking home lies a story so terrifying that it has haunted people for decades. This is the true story of the Amityville Horror, a forbidden house filled with darkness, whispers, and mysteries that no one has ever been able to explain. It all began with a shocking tragedy, a family brutally murdered inside their own home. After that night, nothing was ever the same. Those who dared to live there claims to hear footsteps echoing through empty halls, doors opening and slamming on their own, and shadows moving in the corners of the rooms when no one else was there. The air inside felt heavy, as if something unseen was watching, waiting, breathing right next to you. Some witnesses spoke of strange green slime oozing from the walls. Others said they heard a deep, growling voice telling them to leave the house immediately. The family that lived there after the murders only survived for 28 days before fleeing in terror, abandoning all their belongings inside. Until this very day, no one knows whether the horrors came from restless spirits, dark energy soaked into the ground, or something even more sinister that human minds cannot comprehend. From the outside, the Amityville house still looks like a calm suburban home, but the truth inside is far from peaceful. It is a place where nightmares linger, where every creak of the floor and flicker of the light could be a reminder that something is still alive within those walls. It all started in a small town called Amityville in Long Island, New York. There stood a large, white colonial-style house with attic windows shaped like watching eyes, sitting silently at 112 Ocean Avenue. To anyone passing by, the house looked peaceful, almost inviting, as if it was just another dream home in the suburbs. But behind its charm and beauty, there was a history so dark that even today, people still whisper its name with fear. In November of 1974, the quiet neighborhood was shaken by a tragedy that would never be forgotten. A young man named Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr. took a rifle in the middle of the night and murdered his entire family. His father, his mother, his two younger brothers, and his two younger sisters. Each victim was discovered lying face down in their beds, as if they had fallen into a deep, unnatural sleep. There were no signs of struggle, no attempts to escape, no screams heard by the neighbors. It was as though the entire house had been paralyzed, frozen under some kind of unseen power. When the police asked Ronald why he committed such a crime, his answer was chilling. He said only one thing: "Someone told me to. I was just following the voice." That single sentence marked the beginning of the legend of Amityville. Because if Ronald truly heard voices that pushed him to kill, then what kind of force was living inside that house? The murders made headlines across America, but the story didn't end there. A year later, a new family, the Lutz family, moved into the house, hoping to start a fresh life. But what they experienced in just 28 days became one of the most terrifying hauntings ever recorded. George and Kathy Lutz claimed that almost immediately, the atmosphere inside the home felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were breathing. Strange odors filled the rooms, black stains appeared on the floors, and the sound of footsteps echoed at night when everyone was in bed. George often woke up at exactly 3:15 in the morning, the same time the murders had occurred. Doors slammed violently on their own, crucifixes twisted upside down, and mysterious cold spots froze their skin even when the heating was on. Their young daughter began speaking to an imaginary friend she called Jody, who, according to her, appeared as a red-eyed pig staring from the windows. Sometimes neighbors swore they saw that same creature watching them from the house at night. One of the most horrifying claims was the appearance of green, slimy liquid seeping from the walls and keyholes, as if the house itself was bleeding some kind of unnatural substance. The family tried to remain calm, but every day the fear grew stronger. By the end of the 4th week, they fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving all of their belongings behind. They never went back to collect them. To this very day, no one has been able to fully explain what happened in the Amityville house. Some believe it was the restless spirits of the murdered family, trapped in their violent deaths. Others claim the house itself is cursed, standing on land tainted with dark history even before the tragedy. And skeptics say it was nothing more than imagination fueled by grief and fear. Yet every person who steps inside agrees on one thing. The atmosphere feels wrong, suffocating, as if the house is alive and aware of every breath you take. From the outside, it still looks like a normal, beautiful home. But for those who know its story, the windows, shaped like eyes, are not just part of the design. They are watching, silently, keeping the darkest secrets of what truly happened on Ocean Avenue. And maybe, just maybe, the voices that once spoke to Ronald DeFeo are still there, waiting for someone new to listen. After the tragedy, the house stood empty for a year, its windows watching silently over Ocean Avenue. Until, in 1975, a new family moved in, George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children. For them, it seemed like a dream come true. A spacious colonial home, beautiful on the outside, and offered at a price far lower than what anyone would expect. They thought it was a fresh start. They thought the nightmare was over. But the house had other plans. From the very first day, small things felt wrong. Doors they swore were locked would suddenly stand open. Cold drafts swept through the halls no matter how tightly the windows were shut. George, the father, began to change almost immediately. He grew distant, short-tempered, and obsessive, spending long hours chopping wood outside as if something inside him demanded it. Every single night, at exactly 3:15 in the morning, the same time the DeFeo murders occurred, he would jolt awake, staring into the dark as though something was calling to him. Kathy, his wife, suffered terrifying nightmares. Night after night, she dreamed of being Louise DeFeo, the murdered mother of the house. In her dreams, she felt the sting of the gunshots, the helplessness of not being able to save her children. Sometimes she would wake up with bruises on her body, as if the pain from the dream had followed her back into reality. Her fear grew stronger with each passing night, and the house seemed to feed on it. Their children, once cheerful, began speaking to an invisible friend. At first, the Lutzes assumed it was harmless imagination. But then, each of them described the exact same figure, something childlike but not human, with glowing red eyes. They called it Jody. Sometimes, Kathy would look out the window and see her daughter staring at the glass, talking softly. And reflected in that glass, she swore she saw a second face beside her child, an animal-like grin with eyes burning in the night. Neighbors even reported seeing a creature with red eyes peering from the upstairs windows when no one was supposed to be in the room. The activity only grew worse. A priest was called to bless the house, but the moment he entered, he heard a deep, commanding voice snarl the words, "Get out." He left shaken and warned the family never to sleep in that house again. The Lutzes tried to ignore it, hoping faith and willpower would be enough. But as the days passed, the walls themselves seemed to turn against them. Green slime oozed from the keyholes. Unexplained odors of rot filled the air. Doors ripped off their hinges. Invisible hands slammed against them, rattling the rooms as though something unseen was furious at their presence. George became more unstable, staring for hours at the fireplace as if hypnotized by something in the flames. His face grew pale, his eyes hollow, and Kathy feared that whatever force had once whispered to Ronald DeFeo was now trying to claim her husband. The children cried at night, saying Jody told them not to leave, that the house wanted them to stay forever. By the 28th day, the family could take no more. In the middle of the night, they fled the house, leaving everything behind: clothes, toys, furniture, even food still on the table. They never went back. What exactly drove them out remains a mystery. Some believe it was fear, others believe it was possession, and some say it was simply an elaborate story. But for those who step near 112 Ocean Avenue, the truth feels undeniable. The house still stands, silent and watchful. And many believe that whatever lives inside still waits, whispering in the dark, searching for the next family, brave enough or foolish enough to call it home. Jody was said to look like a giant pig, but with the ability to speak, appearing only at night. The children described her as friendly at first, but Kathy could not shake the feeling that this figure was something far more sinister. One evening, she found her daughter standing by the upstairs window, whispering as if in conversation. When Kathy walked closer and peered outside, her heart froze. In the dark of the backyard, two glowing red eyes stared back at her from the shadows. They were wide, unblinking, and fixed directly on the window, as if waiting to be invited inside. From that moment on, the house seemed to unravel itself. A smell of rotting flesh would suddenly fill the rooms, thick and suffocating, even though there was no source. Objects shifted on their own, and a crucifix they had hung on the wall twisted upside down without a single hand touching it, as if mocking their faith. Worse still, thick green slime began oozing out of the walls, dripping from the ceiling, seeping through the keyholes like the house itself was bleeding some toxic substance. The air grew damp and foul, and no matter how much they cleaned, the filth returned, alive and persistent. George became restless, his mind unraveling with every passing night. He heard footsteps pacing above him, even when no one was upstairs, heavy thuds like boots stomping across the floor. Doors slammed shut in the middle of the night, rattling violently as if unseen hands were trying to trap them inside. And then there were the whispers, low, cold, echoing voices that seeped from the walls and traveled through the hallways. Sometimes it was a growl, sometimes a command, and sometimes it was the faint sound of children crying, even though his own children were fast asleep. The nights grew longer, darker, and more unbearable. George felt as if the house was slowly pulling him into madness, dragging him towards something he couldn't resist. He began waking up drenched in sweat, convinced that someone was standing at the foot of his bed, watching, waiting. The children screamed from nightmares. Kathy grew pale and weak, and every corner of the house seemed alive, pulsing with a presence that fed on their fear. They tried to hold on, to fight back, but the walls seemed to breathe with hatred. What had started as a dream home was now a prison. Every creak in the floorboards a reminder that they were not alone. The house didn't just contain evil, it was the evil. And with each passing night, it tightened its grip, determined to make sure the Lutz family would never escape its grasp. Desperate, the Lutz family invited a priest to bless the house. At first, he walked in with calm conviction, carrying his holy water and prayers, believing faith would be enough to push away whatever lingered inside. But the moment he entered one of the bedrooms, his body stiffened. A sharp, blinding headache pierced his skull, and the air turned thick with an unnatural silence. Then, in a deep, guttural tone that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once, a voice growled one command: "Get out." The words struck him with such force that he staggered backward, his skin breaking out in cold sweat. He tried to continue the blessing, but the presence in the room grew violent, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. His hands trembled, his voice faltered, and in that moment he knew he was not welcome. Shaken to his core, the priest fled the house, refusing to ever set foot inside again. But the horror didn't end at the threshold. In the days that followed, he fell mysteriously ill. His body weakened, fever consumed him, and he was plagued by nightmares of the house, its windows glowing like eyes in the dark. He never spoke openly about what he saw inside, but his warning was clear. No prayer, no blessing could cleanse the evil that lived there. The house had chosen the Lutz family, and it was not ready to let them go. The house had chosen the Lutz family, and it was not ready to let them go. As days went by, things spiraled out of control. The front door would slam open at midnight with a violent force. as if unseen hands were inviting something inside. George began to lose touch with reality, his mind consumed by the house, and one winter night he discovered something that froze his blood. In the snow outside, he saw enormous, slimy footprints leading straight into the house, but not a single mark showing they had ever left. The children grew restless, waking in the dark hours of the night with tears streaming down their faces. Trembling, they whispered that someone was standing at the foot of their beds, watching silently. Kathy would rush to comfort them, but every time she stepped into their rooms, the air turned icy cold, and the shadows seemed to move just beyond her vision. The family could no longer eat, could no longer sleep. Every moment inside those walls suffocated them more and more. Finally, after just 28 days, they could bear no more. In the dead of night, terrified and broken, the Lutz family abandoned the house forever. They left behind clothes in the closets, food still on the kitchen table, toys scattered on the floor, everything frozen in time as if they had simply vanished. They never returned, not even to collect their belongings. Whatever was inside that house had won, driving them out with fear so deep it marked them for life. After the Lutz family fled, countless investigators, journalists, and curious thrill seekers tried to uncover the truth hidden within those walls. Some came away convinced that the house was a gateway for demons, a place where malevolent spirits gathered and fed on fear. Others were sure the land itself was cursed, pointing to legends that spoke of ancient burials and forgotten rituals performed in darkness. Each theory only deepened the mystery. Skeptics, however, dismissed it all as nothing more than fabrication, claiming the Lutz family spun a tale to gain attention, that every slam of a door and whisper in the night was a carefully crafted story. But even the skeptics could not explain the faces that appeared in photographs, the sudden chills caught on camera, or the way electronic devices often failed the moment they crossed the threshold. The debate has never truly ended. What everyone agrees on is that the house carries an energy that cannot be ignored. Today, its walls are repainted, its design altered, and its address changed, as though a new coat of paint could erase the horrors it once contained. But the locals know better. They speak of an unsettling stillness that lingers around the property, of windows that seem to watch long after you've turned away, and of shadows that appear where no one should be standing. For them, the Amityville house is more than just a story. It is a wound on the land itself, one that refuses to heal. And though the world has changed and decades have passed, the dark aura remains, waiting for those brave, or reckless, enough to draw too close. That was the true story of the Amityville Horror, the terrifying secret behind the forbidden house. A home that looks ordinary on the outside, but inside it holds a past drenched in tragedy, a mystery no one has ever solved, and a darkness that still lingers within its walls. If you enjoy real horror stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment about which terrifying story you want me to tell next. Because remember, sometimes a house is not just a house. Sometimes it is a prison for the restless, a doorway to something we cannot explain, and the place where terror itself waits in silence.